Huang Tingjian's famous line about spider threads roaming the Empyrean captures the joy players get from exploring the strategic possibilities of Go. Did you know there are more positions in Go than atoms in the universe? There aren't enough computers on Earth to run every day for 1 million years to analyze them all. It's a game of compounding complexity, Go. The average chess game lasts about 40 moves per player. The average Go game lasts about 100. It's a game many orders of magnitude more complex than chess, by virtue of its branching factor, that's the number of different paths a single game can take with each successive turn. Whereas chess is a game of destruction, with players capturing their opponent's pieces in a war of attrition, Go entails creation and effervescence. The fascination of Go is epitomized by the Chinese story of a woodcutter who, while watching two children playing the game, was so taken by it that he did not realize that the handle of his axe had withered as time passed. This story was well known in Japan, appearing in the collection of Chinese bizarre tales, Jutsuiki, or Records of the Strange. Go thus has been called ranka, or rotten handle, since the early modern period in Japan. It's this transfixing quality we see in today's picture, a triptych by the Edo period artist Utagawa Kunyoshi, who completed it in 1843, just as the Tokugawa shogunate was conducting a new political campaign. The Tenpo reforms of 1841 to 1843 aimed to wipe out all ostentations of conspicuous consumption and wasteful expenditure, prohibiting commoners from enjoying street entertainments, manga, makeshift theatres, and multicolored ukiyo-e prints, as well as delicacies, luxurious clothes, and elaborate accessories. Kunyoshi's triptych depicted a horde of yokai summoned by a legendary ancient tribe of cave dwellers, the titular earth spiders, which was said to be conquered by the Yamato state in old pseudo-historical documents such as the Record of Ancient Affairs, and appeared in war tales like Tales of Weiqi. Here, yokai are summoned back into the world to take revenge on Minamoto Yorimitsu, a shogun from the clan that would later, in the 12th century, establish the first samurai regime. The print caused much controversy, and Kuniyoshi was subjected to cross-examination by shogunate authorities. It's hard to determine what message Kuniyoshi meant to convey in his print, because he never acknowledged any intended political implication and thereby escaped punishment. Nonetheless, contemporary documents indicated that the townspeople interpreted Kuniyoshi's supernatural images as the return of those who had been harmed by the shogunate campaign, thus reading the triptych as an expression of the common people's grudge against the shogunate's repressive reforms. Like many popular illustrations from the Tokugawa period that ridiculed the authorities, Kuniyoshi's print veiled his parody in historical allegory. Hence, a reference to the Minamoto clan was tacitly understood to refer to the Tokugawa regime, who consistently claimed to have ancestral ties to the Minamoto despite lacking any supporting evidence. Kuniyoshi's print also parodied the customary representation of the earth spiders in war tales. In an 1838 print triptych, The Earth Spider and Minamoto Raikō, for example, this legendary outcast depicted as a barbaric and demonic yokai, as in the Tales of Weiqi, was meant to be abhorred and destroyed by heroic warriors. Kuniyoshi, however, transfigured it into a retributive figure, invoking and leading the angry ghosts in seeking their revenge and subverting the order of customary vision purported to glorify the samurai's bravery. Accordingly, the soporific Minamoto no Yorimitsu was cast as the 12th Tokugawa shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu, under whose reign the repressive reforms were implemented. Kuniyoshi rendered the other samurai preoccupied with Go as Ieyoshi's advisors, and the phantoms as the townspeople persecuted during the campaign. The samurai don't realize it yet, but to borrow Go terminology, they're already dead. The mission in Go is to surround more empty intersections on the grid, called points, with your stones than your opponent. Stones are placed to claim territories. Their placement is crucial because their positions are fixed. The only time a stone moves is when it's captured and removed from the board entirely. Stones are killed and removed once they're surrounded by opposing stones. Friendly adjacent stones connected horizontally or vertically cooperate as a unit. Any empty points adjacent to such a unit are called liberties. A liberty is like breathing room. Any stones with liberties are alive. Those without, well, That's where we find the samurai, too distracted by their game of little black and white stones to realize they're surrounded by monochromatic monsters. Kuniyoshi's frustration is palpable in this triptych. Born to a relatively lowly family in the Tokugawa Confucian system and thus constrained socially, Kuniyoshi frequently glorified bandit fraternities, noble thieves, outsiders who triumphed over corrupt officials and government bullies. His work was distinctly anti-establishment, which appealed to the townspeople who recognized their own plight in the characters against a draconian political regime. Kuniyoshi amassed a following by poking fun at the emasculated samurai class, whose martial prowess had suffered terminally ever since the long Tokugawa peace. Supposedly, the shogunal weaponry was so deteriorated from lack of use that the 5th shogun, Tsuneyoshi, couldn't even hold a military inspection. The noble way of the samurai was by this time an empty cliché, and people wanted change. The historian Katsuya Hirano argues that parodies like this were a bellwether for larger changes for Tokugawa society writ large. They reflected the divergent voices and perspectives of the marginalized and urban spaces where supposedly unproductive types like vagrants, peddlers, entertainers, sex workers, writers, artists, laborers, and D-class-A samurai dwelled. Popular novellas, theatre, and prints like Kuniyoshi's communicated realities excluded and concealed by the ruling ideology, reassessing and rearranging the familiar order of things and offering audiences alternative responses to the official reality. Money knew no boundaries, and the emerging social economy cut across boundaries of status. It exerted a corrosive effect on the old mechanisms of hierarchy by promoting the dynamic flow and uninhibited interaction of goods, ideas, knowledge, customs, and people. Parody also reflected the gradual demystification of countryside superstitions. The monsters here are vaudevillian. Superstition becomes sensational. But the shogunate nevertheless suspected these monstrous entertainments. Besides their attack on street entertainments, they believed that because the supernatural was fundamentally unknowable, commoners should stick to more earthly matters. In 1808, for example, a proclamation was brought into effect banning stories about demons. Although given the animosity towards the government anyway, the shogunate's disapproval probably helped Kuniyoshi shift more prints. Go is a great metaphor here for an out-of-touch government caught in the spiderweb of widespread discontent. But there's another game going on here. It's an elaborate game of Guess Who. Minami Kazuo, a historian of Edo popular culture, has constructed a chart comparing the different interpretations of each phantom's presumed identity. For instance, this female ghost with the figure of a deformed child on her head was interpreted as an abortionist in one record, and in others as a sex worker or fortune teller who claimed to have inherited the magical power of the legendary female dragon that was believed to have created, within the premise of Sensoji Temple, a pool of healing for sick children. Abortion and prostitution were forbidden in Confucianism and Buddhism, making her a representative of the world of outcasts that the Earth Spider has unleashed upon the pious Tokugawa moral order. But then, Go has never been a game about hierarchies. It can claim to be the oldest living board game of strategy, surpassing chess in this respect by at least a few hundred years. Unlike chess, in which the forms of the pieces have mutated in response to the cultural milieu in which the game is played, Go pieces have remained basically unchanged since the 8th century. The pieces are essentially abstract, thus Go can easily transcend language barriers. It can be enjoyed according to each player's level. It's easy for the beginner to grasp the basic rules, yet at the highest levels, the game requires exceptional intellectual agility. It's a game for everybody, in other words, not just samurai.